Long ago, before the modern world took shape, before the familiar outlines of continents and nations settled into place, there lived a story whispered across generations, a story of a place both magnificent and mysterious, a place called Atlantis. Even today, thousands of years after it was first described, the name still echoes through history like a distant memory, shimmering just beyond the reach of certainty. Some say it was a myth, others believe it was real, a forgotten civilization, swallowed by the abyss of time. And tonight, we drift slowly into that ancient mystery, to the beginning of the legend. The earliest written account of Atlantis comes to us from the Greek philosopher Plato, who lived in the 4th century BCE. In two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes a powerful island civilization that existed long before the rise of classical Greece. According to the story, the tale was passed down through generations, from Egyptian priests to the Athenian lawmaker Solon, and eventually to Plato himself. The priests spoke of a vast island lying beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Beyond that gateway, they said, stretched a great ocean, and within that ocean, there once stood an empire of extraordinary power and beauty, Atlantis. A land blessed with fertile plains, towering mountains, and deep natural harbors where ships from distant lands once gathered. Its people were said to be advanced beyond any civilization known to the ancient world. Their cities gleamed with architecture of remarkable design. Their society was prosperous, orderly, and guided by laws that sought harmony between humanity and the divine. For a time, Atlantis flourished, a golden age that seemed destined to last forever. At the heart of Atlantis stood its capital city, a place unlike any other described in ancient literature. According to Plato, the city was built in concentric rings, alternating circles of land and water. From above, it would have looked like a great target drawn upon the sea. Channels of water allowed ships to move through the rings, reaching the inner harbor at the city's center. There stood the royal palace, and beside it, a magnificent temple dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea. The temple was said to be adorned with walls of silver, ceilings of ivory, and pillars covered in a mysterious red metal known as orichalcum. In the sunlight, the city shimmered. Bridges connected each ring, lined with statues and towers. Gardens flourished in the warm ocean air. Fountains flowed with fresh spring water, and markets buzzed with the quiet rhythm of daily life. But Atlantis was not only beautiful, it was powerful. Its engineers mastered the movement of water, constructing canals and irrigation systems that nourished vast agricultural plains. Its fleets of ships traveled far across the seas. Its scholars studied the stars. Its craftsmen shaped metals and stone with remarkable skill. Some later legends would even imagine technologies beyond the understanding of the ancient world. Energy drawn from crystals, flying machines, devices that harness the hidden forces of nature. Whether these stories reflect truth, imagination, or something in between, no one can say. But what remains clear is that Atlantis symbolized something extraordinary. A civilization at the height of its potential, a shining example of human achievement. For a time, it seemed unstoppable. Yet, in Plato's telling, greatness carries a quiet danger. Over generations, the people of Atlantis began to change. Where once they lived with wisdom and balance, ambition slowly took hold. Their empire expanded, their power grew, and with that power came pride. The Atlanteans began to see themselves not as guardians of a great civilization, but as rulers destined to dominate the world. Armies were sent beyond their island. Kingdoms across the Mediterranean fell beneath their influence. Cities trembled beneath the weight of Atlantean ambition. According to Plato, only one small nation stood against them: ancient Athens. In the story, Athens represented a different kind of strength, a society built on virtue, discipline, and unity. Though smaller and less powerful, the Athenians resisted the advance of Atlantis. A great conflict followed, and in Plato's narrative, it was Athens that ultimately triumphed. But victory would be short-lived, for something far greater was approaching. A catastrophe unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. The end of Atlantis did not come slowly. It arrived with terrifying suddenness. Plato describes a series of violent earthquakes, shaking the island with unstoppable force. The ground split open, the sea surged inland, buildings collapsed, towers crumbled, and the great rings of the capital city began to fracture. The once tranquil waters of the harbor became a raging chaos. Ships were tossed like leaves upon the storm. Across the island, mountains trembled. The earth groaned beneath unimaginable pressure. And then, the ocean rose in a single day and night of misfortune. Plato wrote, "The island of Atlantis sank beneath the sea. Its magnificent cities, its temples and gardens, its vast empire, all swallowed by the abyss, where once stood one of the greatest civilizations in human history. Only the ocean remained, silent, endless, and empty." Or so it seemed. For centuries after Plato wrote his account, the story of Atlantis drifted quietly through the pages of history. Some philosophers treated it as a moral allegory, a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and the fragility of civilization. Others wondered whether the story might contain a fragment of truth. Perhaps, somewhere in the distant past, a real catastrophe had inspired the legend, a disaster so immense, so unforgettable, that its memory echoed through generations. Over time, the mystery of Atlantis became one of the greatest historical puzzles ever imagined. Where was this lost empire? Did it truly exist? Or was it only a philosophical myth, crafted by Plato to illustrate his ideas about society and morality? The search for answers continues even today. One of the most widely discussed theories connects Atlantis to the ancient island of Thera, known today as Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, this volcanic island experienced one of the largest eruptions in recorded history. The explosion was enormous. Ash darkened the skies across the Mediterranean. Tsunamis swept across nearby coasts. Entire settlements were buried beneath layers of volcanic debris. Some scholars believe this disaster may have contributed to the decline of the Minoan civilization, one of the most advanced cultures of the Bronze Age. When archaeologists excavated the site of Akrotiri on Santorini, they discovered a remarkably sophisticated city preserved beneath volcanic ash. Multi-story buildings, colorful frescoes, advanced plumbing systems, all frozen in time. To some researchers, the parallels with Plato's description seemed striking. A powerful island civilization, destroyed by natural catastrophe. Could the memory of Santorini's eruption have inspired the legend of Atlantis? It is a possibility that continues to intrigue historians. Another theory leads far from the Mediterranean, deep into the deserts of Mauritania, in northwest Africa. There, visible even from space, lies a vast circular formation known as the Rishat structure, often called the Eye of the Sahara. From above, the formation appears as a series of concentric rings stretching across the desert landscape, an enormous geological pattern carved into the earth over millions of years. To some observers, its resemblance to Plato's description of Atlantis's circular city is astonishing. Researchers have noted that the size of the formation roughly matches the dimensions described in ancient texts. There are traces of ancient waterways nearby, and evidence that the region once had a much wetter climate thousands of years ago. Supporters of this theory suggest that the Rishat structure might once have been surrounded by water, forming a fertile island in the distant past. Yet many geologists argue that the formation is purely natural, created by erosion and geological uplift. For now, the Eye of the Sahara remains another fascinating piece of the puzzle. Still other theories place Atlantis beneath the icy waters of the North Atlantic, near the Azores Islands. Some suggest it lies hidden beneath the Mediterranean Sea itself. Others have looked to the Caribbean, Antarctica, or even beneath the shifting sands of the Sahara. Across the centuries, explorers, historians, and dreamers have searched for clues. Submersible expeditions have scanned the ocean floor. Satellite imagery has revealed strange patterns beneath desert landscapes. Archaeologists continue to uncover ancient cities lost to earthquakes, floods, and volcanic eruptions. Yet none have definitively revealed the lost empire of Atlantis. The mystery remains unsolved, and perhaps that is part of its enduring power. Because Atlantis is more than a place, it is an idea, a reflection of humanity's endless fascination with lost worlds. Throughout history, civilizations have risen to remarkable heights, and yet, time has always carried them away. The cities of the Maya, swallowed by jungle, the temples of Angkor, hidden beneath forests, the libraries of Alexandria, lost to flame, again and again. The past reminds us that even the greatest achievements are fragile. Atlantis stands as a symbol of that truth, a reminder that prosperity and wisdom must be guarded carefully, for the forces of nature and the choices of humanity can change the course of history in a single moment. But Atlantis also represents something hopeful. It invites us to imagine a civilization that once achieved harmony between knowledge, beauty, and the natural world. A society where architecture and science flourished together, where cities shimmered beside the sea, where gardens and temples reflected a deep respect for the universe. Perhaps Atlantis never existed exactly as Plato described. Perhaps it is a tapestry woven from fragments of many ancient cultures, Minoan, Egyptian, Mycenaean, or perhaps it is something even older, a memory carried through the collective imagination of humanity, a dream of what civilization might become, if guided by wisdom rather than pride. As we drift toward the end of this story, the ocean still holds its secrets. Beneath miles of dark water, countless ruins lie undiscovered. Mountains rise from the seafloor. Ancient coastlines rest far below the surface, reminders of a time when sea levels were much lower than they are today. It is entirely possible that entire cities from prehistoric eras now rest silently beneath the waves, waiting. Perhaps one day, technology will reveal something extraordinary, a submerged harbor, stone walls arranged in perfect circles, echoes of a forgotten age rising slowly from the deep. Until then, Atlantis remains where it has always been, suspended between myth and possibility, and perhaps that is exactly where it belongs. Because the mystery of Atlantis invites us to pause, to reflect on the passage of time, to imagine the civilizations that came before us, and the ones that may come after. It reminds us that knowledge is never complete, that the past still whispers beneath the surface of the world we know, and that somewhere, beyond the horizon of certainty, there are still stories waiting to be discovered. So as the night grows quiet, and the ocean stretches endlessly beneath the stars, we remember the legend of a shining island, a city of shimmering temples and tranquil harbors, a civilization that rose to greatness, and then vanished beneath the waves, Atlantis, the lost empire, swallowed by the abyss, yet never truly forgotten. In the quiet depths of ancient memory, there is a story that has drifted through the centuries like a whisper carried across the sea. A story of a civilization so magnificent, so advanced, that it seemed to belong more to myth than to history. A city of shining temples, of vast harbors filled with ships, of knowledge and power far beyond its time. A place known by a single name, Atlantis. The first detailed account of Atlantis appears in the writings of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, more than 2,300 years ago, in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. Plato tells the story as something passed down through generations. The tale begins with the Athenian lawmaker Solon, who is said to have visited Egypt around the 6th century before the Common Era. There, in the shadow of temples far older than Greece itself, Egyptian priests shared a story with him, a story preserved in their records, a story about a powerful island civilization that existed long before the rise of classical Greece. They told Solon that beyond the Pillars of Heracles, beyond what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, there once lay a vast island, an island larger than Libya and Asia combined, according to the account. This island was Atlantis, and from this island, the Atlanteans ruled a great maritime empire. Their influence stretched across the seas, touching distant lands, commanding trade routes, and shaping the fate of surrounding civilizations. But Atlantis, the priest said, had vanished, swallowed by the ocean in a single, catastrophic day and night. For centuries, the story remained a philosophical curiosity. Some believed Plato intended Atlantis only as a moral allegory, a warning about the dangers of pride and power. Others wondered whether the philosopher had preserved a fragment of real history, a memory of a civilization lost to time. Whatever its origin, the legend endured, and within that legend lies the vision of Atlantis at the height of its glory. Imagine an island rising from the deep blue waters of the Atlantic. Its shores were rich and fertile, nourished by warm winds and gentle rains. Green plains stretched across the land, dotted with rivers, forests, and distant mountains. In the center of the island stood the capital, the great city of Atlantis, a marvel of engineering and design. According to Plato, the city was built in a series of concentric rings, alternating between land and water. Circular canals surrounded the central island, connected to the sea by a grand channel. Bridges arched over the waterways, linking each ring to the next. Ships moved gracefully through the canals, carrying goods from distant ports. And at the heart of the city stood a sacred hill. Upon that hill rose the magnificent temple of Poseidon, god of the sea. The temple was adorned with shining metals, gold, silver, and a mysterious substance known as orichalcum. Orichalcum, Plato wrote, glowed with a fiery radiance, second only to gold in value. The walls of the temple reflected sunlight like a living flame. Inside, colossal statues towered over visitors. One depicted Poseidon himself, standing in a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses. Gazing out across the ocean, he ruled. The people of Atlantis lived in remarkable prosperity. Their fields produced abundant harvests. Their forests provided timber for ships and buildings. Their mountains held rich deposits of metals and precious stones. Water flowed through carefully constructed aqueducts, supplying the city with fresh springs. Bathhouses and fountains dotted the landscape. The Atlanteans mastered the art of shipbuilding. Their fleets traveled far beyond their island, exploring distant coasts, trading with foreign lands. Some legends even suggest that their knowledge extended beyond simple mechanics. They possessed an understanding of energy, astronomy, and architecture that seemed far ahead of its time. Whether these details were truth, embellishment, or imagination, the image of Atlantis grew into something almost dreamlike. A shimmering city rising above the sea, a civilization balanced between nature and ingenuity. But Plato's account also contains a quiet warning. For as generations passed, the Atlanteans began to change. Their prosperity, once a blessing, slowly transformed into arrogance. Power can be a delicate thing, and civilizations, like individuals, are not immune to the pull of pride. The rulers of Atlantis, descended from Poseidon himself, once governed with wisdom and restraint. They valued harmony, law, and balance. But over time, the divine spark within them began to fade. Greed replaced humility. Ambition overshadowed wisdom. The Atlanteans sought not only prosperity, but domination. Their armies expanded. Their fleets grew larger, more numerous, more aggressive. They looked beyond their island, toward the lands of the Mediterranean. And according to the ancient story, they attempted to conquer them. But destiny, as it often does, had other plans. Plato describes the end of Atlantis in haunting simplicity. The gods, seeing the corruption of this once noble civilization, decided to bring judgment upon it. What followed was not a slow decline. It was sudden, violent, unforgettable. One night, the earth began to tremble. At first, it was only a faint vibration beneath the soil. But soon, the trembling grew stronger. The ground split open. Great fissures tore through the land. Temples shook. Bridges collapsed into the canals. Across the island, panic spread like wildfire. The sky darkened. Thunder rolled across the horizon. The sea itself seemed to stir, rising and falling with unnatural force. Some say volcanic fire erupted from the earth. Others imagine towering waves, rising from the deep like silent giants. Perhaps it was both. The catastrophe unfolded with relentless power. Mountains crumbled, cities fractured. The great harbor walls, once symbols of Atlantean mastery, shattered against the raging sea. And then, the final moment. The island, that shining jewel of the Atlantic, began to sink. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, then faster. The land slipped beneath the waves. Water poured into the broken canals. The temples, the palaces, the towers of Atlantis were swallowed by the abyss. In a single day and night of misfortune, Plato wrote, Atlantis vanished. When the waters finally settled, nothing remained, only the vast ocean, stretching silently to the horizon. The empire that had once ruled the seas was gone, and in its place there remained only echoes of a forgotten age. For centuries, the legend of Atlantis drifted through human imagination. Writers, philosophers, explorers, all wondered whether some fragment of truth might lie behind Plato's words. Could an entire civilization truly disappear beneath the sea? The ocean is vast. Even today, much of its depths remain unexplored. Hidden landscapes lie far below the surface, silent and untouched. And so, the search for Atlantis began. One theory points to the island of Santorini in the Aegean Sea, thousands of years ago. Santorini was the site of one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in human history. Around 1600 years before the Common Era, the volcano exploded with extraordinary force. The eruption destroyed the flourishing Minoan settlements nearby. Ash darkened the sky. Massive tsunamis swept across the Mediterranean. Some scholars believe that memories of this catastrophe, passed down through generations, eventually reached Plato. In this interpretation, Atlantis may not have been a single island empire, but a poetic reflection of the Minoan civilization, a civilization that truly did suffer sudden destruction. Another intriguing theory lies far from the sea, deep within the Sahara Desert, in Mauritania. There is a massive geological formation known as the Richat structure. From above, it resembles a series of enormous concentric circles. Some have called it the Eye of the Sahara. Satellite images reveal rings of land that bear a striking resemblance to Plato's description of Atlantis's circular layout. Could this mysterious formation once have been near water, before the desert claimed the region? Most geologists believe the structure is entirely natural, formed through millions of years of erosion. Yet its strange symmetry continues to capture the imagination. There are other theories as well. Some place Atlantis in the Caribbean. Others suggest it lies somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, perhaps buried beneath layers of sediment. A few even speculate that it could exist beneath the ice of Antarctica. But so far, no definitive evidence has ever been found. No ruins, no artifacts, no unmistakable traces of a lost empire beneath the waves. And perhaps that is part of the mystery. Atlantis occupies a curious place in human thought. It is not quite history, not quite myth. It lives somewhere between the two. A symbol, more than a location. A story that reflects something deep within us. Civilizations rise, they flourish. They build cities, monuments, knowledge, and sometimes they disappear, buried by time, lost to disaster, forgotten by the generations that follow. Atlantis reminds us that even the greatest achievements can be fragile, that power without wisdom can lead to ruin. And yet, the legend also speaks to hope. Because the idea of Atlantis suggests that humanity has always dreamed of greatness, of knowledge, harmony, and progress. Perhaps Atlantis never existed as Plato described it, or perhaps, somewhere in the silent depths of the ocean, the ruins of a forgotten city still rest, columns covered in coral, streets buried beneath sand, fragments of stone that once formed temples glowing with orichalcum, waiting, patiently, for the day they are discovered. Until then, Atlantis remains what it has always been, a whisper from the past, a shimmering city of memory, an empire swallowed by the sea, yet never truly lost. Because as long as the story is told, as long as curious minds continue to wonder, the legend of Atlantis will endure, drifting gently through the currents of time like an echo from a forgotten age.